Welcome back, everyone. Thank you all for your help with what to do with the grout color. I was sure by the end of the last video that I had ruined the tile job in here, but the majority of you said that the grout color is just fine and everything should come together once there's some color on the walls. So what I'm going to do today is start off with some paint. I am a very messy painter. So what I'm doing is I'm just going around the whole room where there's tile, and I'm sticking this masking tape right to the very edge where the tile ends and the grout begins. Normally this tape is good enough just to mask off an area that I don't want to get paint on, but I'm going to be painting the ceiling in here too, and whenever I use the roller it just likes to spray everywhere. So to keep that spray from hitting my tile, I'm going to be using this. This is one of those half-mil painter's tarps. I just cut them in half so I have more coverage area in the room. So I'm just sticking it to the bottom of my tape, and it is going to keep the tile covered and nice and clean. I'm starting off with some primer, and this is the brand I use. It's Kills PVA. I'm not a sponsor, but just in case you're wondering which brand I use, this is it. I like this brand because it goes on nice and thick, and it's not supposed to cover like paint. That's why it's primer. It's just supposed to be enough to get the wall covered so it can be ready for the paint. I'm just getting it up as close to the ceiling and any other obstacles like the tub here as I can, and then when I'm done with the roller, I'm just going to go back with the paintbrush and finish up the edges and corners. I got this whole wall covered. Now I'm just going to go back over it one more time with just whatever residue is left on the roller, and I want to make sure that everything is nice and even. So I want to go over it with nice long strokes like this, and that'll make sure that I don't have any roller lines left over. Also, while I'm doing this final roll, I just want to look for any leftover little bits of contamination like drywall dust or just anything that would affect the finish that gets picked up by the roller over the painting process. Yeah, there's one of them right there. Smooth it over with the roller. Oh, and I pick up another one. That's nice. There we go. That looks better. There was a time in my younger years that I did not use drywall primer before I painted fresh drywall, and I just thought it was just a total waste of time and money to do it. And maybe 4 or 5 years went by, and some of the tenants started using those command hook, picture holders and things like that. And the majority of them would come off without pulling the paint off. But there were a few that happened to be stuck on a drywall seam, someplace where there was just compound only. And for some reason, paint just doesn't stick to that. It does initially, but it doesn't bond as well as it would if it were just right on the paper. So I talked to a painter guy that I knew, and he said, yeah, that was the reason why. That won't happen if you use drywall primer first. So from that point on, I started using drywall primer and realized it wasn't a waste of time anymore, because whenever you have to paint over a spot where paint is peeled off a wall, it just never looks the same again. So this really makes my work look good over many years. If you're wondering why I'm using a pole on my roller, it's for a lot of reasons. I know I'm tall enough to just use it without in this room. These ceilings are, what, 8 foot tall, and I'm 6'2", somewhere around there. So that's not the issue. The reason I use it is so I can stand back and work. Not only does it keep the splatter from getting on me, but also it's so I can, I'm not too close to what I'm working on and I can see it a whole lot better. Oh, and the other thing is when I'm rolling paint on the roller, I can keep the pan on the floor, which is nice because I don't have to do any bending over to reach the pan. And when you get old like me, the less bending you have to do throughout your day, the better you feel at the end of it. The ceiling is getting a coat of primer also, and I'm just doing that for a couple of reasons. There were a couple of spots that I had to touch up with some drywall compound, and I wanted those covered up. And the other reason is the previous owners were smokers, so a lot of cigarette tar buildup got stuck on the ceiling. Now I did wipe it off over the summer with some ammonia and water mix, and that did a really good job, but there's still a little bit of color left behind, and I wanted to cover it up with this stuff instead of having to put 2 coats of ceiling paint on to cover up that nasty yellow color. The last thing to do with the primer is to just finish up these little bits that I couldn't get with the roller. And I'm using my chisel tip brush with the leftover paint in the pan here. And this doesn't usually take too long, so I should be done here in about 10 minutes. That's it for the primer, and it's amazing to me what that little bit of color change has done for this room. It looks a whole lot better in here. Everything's nice and bright, and it makes the grout color really look 1000% better to me. So that makes me a lot happier. There's about 2 hours left of drying time on the walls and the ceiling, so I'm done in this room for today. I got another apartment to go work on anyway this afternoon, so I will be back in the morning and I will get the finished paint color on the walls. I looked around the room this morning to see if there were any imperfections in the drywall that showed up now that the primer is dried, and I only ran across one, and it's right here. And it's kind of a weird situation because what it looked like, what happened was the primer had got behind the layer of joint compound and it bubbled it right off. So I can only assume that there was something on the wall, like a grease or a wax or maybe even soap, that kept that joint compound from sticking properly. So what I did was I took some rough sandpaper and I went over it a few times till I got a nice scratchy rough surface there. So hopefully this new layer of joint compound will hold on a whole lot better than the previous one. All right, that's not going to take very long to dry. It's about 70 degrees in here with 40% humidity. So while that's doing its thing, I'm going to go start painting the ceiling. Oh, check out that pretty color. What, you don't think a pink ceiling will look nice in this bathroom? Well, you're right. Actually, this is a pink dye that the manufacturer intentionally adds to the paint. So when you're painting a white ceiling, this will go on just a little bit different color, so you know the places where you painted and you don't miss any spots along the way. And don't worry, the pink color will disappear once the paint dries. When I paint a room, I always start at the top and I work my way down. And that's just because I'm messy. Any paint that I get splattered on the walls, or if I bump the roller against the wall while I'm painting the ceiling, it's okay because I know that I'm just going to cover it over as soon as I get done with the ceiling and start painting the walls. I don't know if you can see the color difference here, but it's pretty obvious to me. One side is more pink, and I can see exactly what I rolled over already. And that makes my life a whole lot easier. That's why I've been using this brand for, over 10 years now. And it goes on thick and just covers really nicely. Plus I can see what I'm doing. I'm putting this stuff on thicker than I did with the primer, and just because it's the finished coat and you want it to look as good as possible. And I'm going in straight lines like this, and then when I go back for the next pass, I overlap them by at least a third, and that way I'm sure to get full coverage that way. There is no sheen on this paint. It is completely flat, but which is usually something you wouldn't want to use in a bathroom because of all the moisture. But the nice thing about this brand, it is mildew and mold resistant, so it's okay to use it in a bathroom or any other wet space of your house. This is the same chisel tip brush I used with the primer, and I'm not being too incredibly picky about how close I get to the wall here. If I get a little bit past that corner onto the wall, I'm okay with it. When I will get picky is when I get to the paint on the wall. I'm gonna really get meticulous about it. All right, that's it for the edges on the ceiling. My patch over here isn't quite dry yet, so I'm gonna give it another half hour or so and then give it a quick sand. Looks like my patch is dry now. This took a little longer than I had hoped it would, but just a quick sand here. Get my dust out of there, and a little bit of primer. And I'm gonna let that dry for about 45 minutes to an hour. Ready to see the wall color? There it is. I came up with this color by taking in a sample of the floor tile to the hardware store, and I matched up one of the lighter tones in the tile to one of their color chips, and they made up the paint for me. So I'm hoping that once everything is done in the bathroom, the floor and the walls and everything else will all come together. If you've ever painted a wall or something with a roller and you realize that it's always so much easier painting by the end of the project than it is at the beginning, and that's because the roller just isn't saturated enough. So what I like to do before I ever put this thing on the pole is I like to just roll it and work the paint into the roller all the way around just to make sure it's totally saturated, and that makes starting the painting job a whole lot easier. This paint is nice and thick, and I bought it from True Value, and their paint is always, in my opinion, expensive, but nothing in the world is free anymore. I want to say it was about $45 a gallon, something like that, but they always have their sales, and I buy as much as I can and just keep it on stock at the house. So when I do need to paint and there isn't a sale going on, I have it on hand. I used to use cheaper paint. I think Walmart carried some $15 paint at one point in time, and it covered like $15 paint. It was 2 or 3 coats at least just to get it done. And they water their stuff down, so really you get what you pay for. This is, when you buy expensive paint, you're paying for time. Time saved. I found that my best quality paint jobs are when I take it slow, and that's kind of hard to do when you have ADD. So I just have to clear my mind as best as I can and just learn to slow down and make sure that everything comes out nice and smooth. I'm doing even long strokes, and I go back over my work just to make sure there aren't any roller marks or missed spots. And as soon as my roller gets just a little bit dry, I load it up again and I start all over. I mentioned before that the ceiling paint is flat, and that's okay because it has moldicide and mildewicide in there. So that's not the case with this paint. This is just regular old any room paint for interior use, and so it has a sheen to it. This one is one thing below gloss, so I think that is semi-gloss, and that's good for a bathroom. You know, the higher the gloss, the better it is for a room with moisture in it, because this paint would just act as a barrier for the moisture to get into the drywall. Years ago, when we didn't have the type of drywalls that were moisture resistant, the only real defense you had in a bathroom was glossy paint. So I remember a lot of bathrooms from my childhood had that on there, or even worse, some kind of vinyl wallpaper, usually with big flowers and stuff, you know, things from the 70s. All right, once again, I'm using my chisel tip brush, and I just have a little bit of paint on here, and when I press it on the wall, it just fans out, and I'm dragging it across real tight to that corner, and that gives me a nice crisp edge between the wall and the ceiling. And then I just go back over it and smooth out my extra paint that I left on the wall. It's best that you don't have any caffeine while you're doing this, because you want as steady of a hand as possible. Now, I'm right-handed, so I'm going from left to right. And if you're left-handed, I think you should go the other direction. So if this isn't your thing, if you don't think you're steady enough to do this or have enough patience, there's another way to go, and that's with a painter's shield. You can buy a painter's shield, or if you happen to have a large drywall knife like this, you can use that instead. So it just goes up into the corner, and I only have a little bit of paint left on my brush here. So get that as tight up as I can, smooth it out, and then you got a really pretty good looking paint line there. So the only disadvantage to that is you're gonna have to wipe off the back side every time, because a little bit of paint does go over the edge, and you're just gonna end up making more of a mess if you don't clean it off every time. So do it again, and there it is, nice and easy. The paint has dried, and it's just a few shades darker than it was when it was wet, and you can see that it really matches the floor nicely. So I'm liking the way this room is coming together. Well, that's the end of the video. If you liked what you saw, hit the thumbs up button. If you want to see more videos like this, or you haven't subscribed yet, hit the subscribe button, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you know when the next video is going to come up. Caesar and I will see you next time. Wow, all my morning phlegm has come up to say hello. Let's turn you just a little bit here. That looks, oh, and you're falling over. Looks like the primer got behind the drywall compound, also known as joint compound. Yes, there's schmutz on my roller. What the heck? Looked around the room this morning to see if there are any imperfections that showed up now that the primer, okay, all right. Gunk, gunk, gunk. All right, and I went over it a few times, so I got a nice greasy, grippy surface. There's dog hair in my paint.